Hey guys, so a long time ago, before they had planes and stuff, when you wanted to go somewhere, you had to ride in a train. The thing with trains is if you want to go somewhere, you have to build the track. And so in Canada, they built a big train track all the way from one side of Canada to the other. It was called the North Atlantic Pacific Railway. And this was a big deal because now you can travel from one side of Canada to the other, and also because they made it really pretty. It went through meadows, through hills and forests, and it went by a winding creek. And on the first time that a train went on this railroad, it went through the meadows and through the hills and through the forests, and when it went by the creek, it went and the conductor, he looked down the train and he saw there was water everywhere, covering the tracks, and the train was stuck. So he had to send word all the way back to the station, and the station had to send a train out to that train, and that train had to drag the train back to the station, and then they had to get guys on those pumping carts, and they had to pump their way all the way out there to see why there was water everywhere. And they went out there, and they saw that there were beavers that had built a dam by the creek. So they went in, and they kicked the dam down, and all the water flowed out, and the water left the tracks, and then it was clear for the train. So they pumped the way back, and the next day, the train went to go on its first voyage across the North Atlantic Pacific Railway for the second time. And it went through the meadows, through the hills, through the forests, and when it got to the creek, it went and the conductor looked out, and he saw there was water everywhere again. So he's like, oh, and he had to send word back to the station, and the station sent a train over there to get that train, and that train took the other train back to the station, and the guys pumped their way out there, and they saw that the beavers were here again. So they're like, all right, we got to do something to stop these beavers. And these people, they knew that beavers like the night. They work at night. So they went back to the station, and they got these big lights, and they brought them back, and they set them up, and they turned them on, pointing all where the beavers were working. So then it would be always day, so the beavers couldn't work. And so they pumped their way back to the station, and then on the next day, the train went to go on its first voyage for the third time, and it went through the meadows, through the hills, through the forests, and when it got to the creek, it once again went. The conductor already knew what happened. There was water still again. So he sent word back to the station, and the station sent a train, and that train pulled the other train back there, and the guys pumped the way out, and they looked there, and they saw that the lights had been covered with mud. The beavers had taken mud and covered up the lights so then they would have night again and then they could build. It's like, oh boy, this is a problem. So we have to get out the big guns. So they pumped their way back to the station, and they filled up their cart with sticks of dynamite. And they went back to where the beavers were. They put the dynamite in the dams. They put it in the beaver huts. They put it wherever they saw tracks of beavers going, except for the railway, of course, because they didn't want to blow that up. And they blew it all up. It was decimated. And after they blew it up, they apologized to the beavers because they're Canadian, and then they pumped their way back to the station. And then on the fourth day, the train went to go on its first journey across the North Pacific Atlantic Railway for the fourth time, and it went through the meadows and through the hills and through the forest, and when it got to the creek, once again, it went. He looked out, he already knew. There was water everywhere. Once again, these beavers had built the dam again, even after it had been all blown up. And by now, the railroad, the station, already knew to send the train back, so they didn't have to send word back to get it. And it took it, and it pulled the train back. And this time, when the guys pumped their way out to the place where the beavers were living, instead of trying to break down the beaver dam, they built the railroad around the creek where the beavers were living, because these were very persistent beavers. And still to this day, if you go and ride the North Pacific Atlantic Railroad, the track might or might not, I don't actually know if this is a true story or not, have a detour around the creek where those beavers lived. And so I want you guys to remember, if you're ever feeling stuck and you want to give up, remember, be like the beavers and be persistent. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you that you've given us skills that we can use for you. Please help us to use them. And when times get rough, please help us to be like the beavers and not give up. Thank you, guys.